Yeah, sure.
All right, my server is up. Let me share my screen. So all of you, did you practice anything in the weekend in the last few days? So whatever we did on Monday. So by any chance we completed the leave application?
Yeah, Rahul, we practiced.
Yeah, yeah, Rahul.
Okay. Any queries, any doubts you faced while implementing?
I have one small question, Rahul, regarding the
Yeah.
data mapping.
Mhm.
So, so when we for in the manager client side human services, right?
Mhm.
So we created an output variable where we actually mapping the um, in the data mapping, even though for the output we are mapping that input, right?
Hmm.
I'm just concerned, why are we doing that? Because we already binded the data object to the output, right? What happens if
Hmm.
we map the same output variable to the output itself?
Yeah, so often it has been found. Okay, let me show you one thing.
Okay.
I did this one. So basically, what you were asking is that in that manager human service,
Yeah.
we had created variables, and in the input we had this, in the output we had a different output variable.
Yes.
So you're asking that whether we can have the same variable or not, right?
No. If you no, no, no. In the data mapping, like
Hmm.
if you go to the data mapping, so we mapped. Uh, can you go to the data mapping?
Hmm.
So so can we map tw.local dot the same output variable here?
You're talking about this one?
Yeah, this one and also that
No.
same the other one that you mentioned.
This one we cannot change because this one is our process variable. On the right hand side, whatever we are mapping here as an output mapping, so this variable is my private variable of this process, which will finally have the updated output information. So we cannot map any other variable over here.
Okay, okay. Then why is it we have a different output variable when we are?
That's a Yeah, that's a different question. So that is like why we have created. So your question can be like, there can be two questions out of this. So one is that, first, why we need an output variable here, and second is that why did we create an output variable of a different name? Okay, so here we did some assignment. If you remember, here in this script I made some assignment that I initialized the output variable, and then I mapped the variable which where I have mapped all the coach views.
Yeah,
So instead of doing this, I could have also done in this way, that in the variables, instead of adding a different output variable, I could have added the same, whatever I have added as an input, I could have added the same name over here also. Then in that case, I don't have to do this assignment which I've done here. Then that is not required. Okay. This part would not be required in that case. So
okay,
whatever name I provided here, I could have provided the same name.
okay. So in this case, if there, let's say, if there is another human, like another level of manager approval required, let's say another level. So in that case, this particular output variable, O employee information, would be the input, right? For the
Correct.
other. Okay, cool.
Correct.
Makes sense.
Yes.
Okay, yeah, I'm good, Rahul.
So even if there is no other activity, like I said last day, even if there is no other activity after manager task, still I need output variable so that I can update the latest data to the process variable.
Okay, makes sense.
Okay.
Rahul, I have a question.
Yes.
I wanted to validate the date field, start date, should be equal to system or greater than. I couldn't implement that. So, do you have any suggestion on that? How to do that?
You have to write a logic for that. So
No,
in the validation,
get the current date. How to get the current date in?
get the current date. So getting current date. Something like this is there. I forgot. So there is a function or method which is there in BPM, out of the box method, which always gives you the current date. Okay. So
Oh, okay, okay. Thank you.
this is not the right one. I'll let you know. Okay, by tomorrow I'll let you know.
Okay, thank you.
I have the code written somewhere. But yes, there is a method which will give you the current date of the system. So basically, you can just take that and you can just pass it to any BPM variable. But yes, whatever current date you want to capture, that can be captured only using the JavaScript variable. So like this is a JavaScript variable. So like this, we have to initialize, and then we need to. There is a method which we need to call to get the current date. So I'll let you know by tomorrow.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Any other doubts or queries, guys? Okay. So today actually I don't have much time, so I'll make a hard stop at 9 because I have a meeting from 9 a.m. So what we will do, we'll start Ajax service today. So we'll see one implementation on type ahead, and we'll complete that. And then tomorrow, so I had a plan to start the coach view today, so to show you the layout, how layout can be implemented in multiple coaches. So that session would take some time. It would take somewhere around 1 to 1.5 hours. So better we start tomorrow. So today let's start the Ajax service, and we are going to implement a type ahead today, where using an Ajax service, I will populate some data in the type ahead. Now, I believe type ahead is something which we all are aware of. It's very similar to what we see in the Google search bar. Whenever we are typing something, we see some suggestions are coming in, and we use the suggestions to search something in the search bar. Now, that's a type ahead way of implementing. That's a different thing altogether. The Google search bar. But type ahead is something that you will see in many websites where it will tell you that type your country name. It would be a text box where it says that type your country name, and whenever you type IN, it would give you suggestions for those countries which has IN characters in their country name. So only those countries will be visible, and from there you can select any one of them. Now the advantage of using a type ahead is that, say for example, you have populated a list of countries in a drop down. Okay, let's forget about type ahead. Let's come to drop down. Now in a drop down, displaying 199 countries as a list is a bit hectic job, at least for the end user I'm talking about. Because if I have to select India from a drop down of 199 items, then it would be very difficult for me to use a scroll bar and search and go down and then you select India from that drop down. So it would be a very very big hectic thing for me. Instead, if someone tells me that this is a text box and type your country's name, and over there, whenever I'm typing IN, out of 199 countries, now I'm able to see only 10 countries which has IN in it. And from there, I select India. So it is much more easier for me to select India out of 10 countries than 199 countries. Right? So that is the reason we use a type ahead. You will see mostly nowadays in those drop downs which has very huge number of lists. Okay. So we often convert that into a type ahead. Okay, so typepad is much more better from the responsive, I mean, from the performance perspective than using a drop down. Even from the look and feel, also, typepad looks much more better from a drop down. Okay, now type ahead can be implemented in two ways. Okay, now both the ways we have to use Ajax service. Ajax service is must for a typepad. Without an Ajax service, we cannot implement a typepad at all. Now, one way is definitely I create a database, and in that database table, I will have a list of 199 countries. And whenever I'm typing something, my Ajax service will go to the DB, will call the table, and from there, it will only get the list of items which has IN in it. That is one implementation that is using database. Now, what if I don't have a database? If I have to produce some kind of static list, okay, so in that case, how do I do it? So we'll see that implementation today. how to create an Ajax service, and we are going to see some features of Ajax service, and also we'll see the implementation. And going forward, when we have a database session, that time I'll show you how to implement an Ajax service, uh, which will call the database table to get the result. Okay. So we'll see both the implementations. So for type ahead, what we will do, uh, let's create a standalone human service. Okay. And in that human service, we are going to add a type ahead coach view, and then we are going to implement the Ajax service on type ahead. Now the thing is, this type ahead coach view was not there before. Okay, so before 8.5.7, when we had the older versions like 8.5.6 or 8.5, we never had this VPM UI toolkit. And what we used to do, we used to copy the coach view from the system, from the main toolkit that we had that time, that is coaches. And there was a coach we called drop down single select, and that we used to copy to our process application, and we used to use that for a type ahead. We had to change some property, and then we used to convert that into a type ahead. So later on, when this 8.5.7 came into picture, and when this Spark UI toolkit was added, so typepad was already an Ajax service. Was already a coach view that was added inside the toolkit. So now we don't have to create any separate coach view for implementing typepad. Okay, so simply we can uh, directly drag and drop the coach view, typepad coach view, and we can implement it. Coming to the variables, we will create one variable called data input. It will be string. So we'll save it, and now we'll come to the coach. We'll start with the default coach, and from the right hand side block, we are going to drag type ahead as a type ahead text box. We'll just drag it, and we'll give a name, say country list. So we are going to implement the country list over here. So we need to select only one country out of say 10, 15 countries, whatever we populate, and that we are going to implement through an Ajax service. Okay. Now, first of all, why this variable was required? This variable is basically required because whatever we type over here, that value will be captured in that variable and will be passed as an input to my Ajax service. Okay, and whatever I populate inside my Ajax service, okay, so I have to populate a list of countries just in the Ajax service, and this variable will try to find out which are the items which is matching with this data, and whenever it finds any match, it will show that list in my type ahead. Right, very simple. So let's now implement the type ahead. Okay, now we'll do some configuration for this type ahead, and for that, what do I need to do? First thing, I will bind this variable with this parameter. Now this parameter is again is doing two work. One is definitely it is passing some data to the Ajax service, and second is after you finally select the value India, then even that value is also getting captured in the same parameter. So it is doing two things together. Okay, so data input, and now we'll again go to the configuration property. Okay, like we have gone to the configuration property of a drop down before, similarly for a type aid also we are going to the configuration property. Why is so slow? Now here, similar to a drop down, we also have something called item lookup mode. And in this item lookup mode, there is no option like items from static list. We have only two options. One is items from service and items from list. And start MD, you know that it's a dummy kind of data. Okay, it's a dummy kind of lookup mode which is added on the first time because everything is empty at the moment. And then you implement either service or list. Up to you. So we are going to implement it using this option called items from service. And while after selecting items from service, I need to create my own Ajax service, and that I need to map it over here. Okay. Now, here what we see a dummy Ajax service added. Okay. Now, definitely there is some meaning behind adding this Ajax service over here. Okay. It's not that I create my own Ajax service and I simply replace it. It will start working. No, it will not work in that way. Uh, this Ajax service that is added right now, default type ahead item service, this has a specific signature. Okay. What do I mean by signature? A specific input and output. So we need to follow the same signature of this dummy Ajax service, then only it will start working. Okay. Now, what do I mean by signature? Let me explain. Let us go inside this dummy Ajax service. First of all, you can see at the top it says read only, right? Because it is the out of the box BPM Ajax service which cannot be modified, which I cannot modify, which I cannot change any property of this particular service. So it is read only. And coming to the diagram, you see there is nothing in between. I can just see a start and end event and a simple sequence flow which is connected between them, which clearly says that it doesn't have any implementation. Now, talking about the signature, if I come to variables, you see there is a variable in the input called data of type string, and I have an output called results, which is list of string. Right now, the thing is, if I don't follow this signature while creating my own Ajax service, my Ajax service will not work. That is very unfortunate, but that is true. Now, what do I mean by keeping the same signature? I have to create my own Ajax service which will have the same variable name with the same data type both at the input and the output. You can understand what I'm trying to say here. Say if it is results, then I cannot create an output variable called result. It has to be results. It cannot be list of name value pair. It has to be list of string. If you want to modify this input variable from data to data input, it will not work. You have to keep the same variable name called data. Okay. Now, additionally, I will add one more thing over here. Now, if you think apart from these two parameters, you want to add more, definitely you can. There is no harm in adding more parameters. You can add more private variables. You can have more input variables. You can have more output variables. Doesn't matter, it will still work. But still, we need to keep the same signature in our Ajax service. Otherwise, the Ajax service which we are implementing for the type head, it will not work. So this dummy service is actually telling you or guiding you what kind of signature I should have for my own Ajax service implementation, okay, for this type head. Right? So we are good in this. Any queries or questions on the discussion that we had? And then only we'll move forward and create our own Ajax service.
We are good. No doubts, Rahul.
All right. Okay. So now we need to create our own Ajax service. And if I come to Ajax service now, if I go back to desktop designer, on the left hand side palette, we have an option called implementation. And if you click on implementation, you will get the several options like integration service, Ajax service, general system service. So we need to select Ajax service from there, and then we can create the Ajax service. The implementation is the same, the coding part is the same, but the way of creating an Ajax service in a desktop designer is completely different. How we create an Ajax service in a web designer. Okay. Now in web designer, what they have done, they have all added all the different service types together as a service flow. Okay, we have something called service flow, the second option that you can see. They have added or they have merged all the services like integration service, general system service, and Ajax service together under one service called service flow. But while creating the service flow or after creating the service flow, I have to configure this service flow in a way that it can work either as an integration service or as an Ajax service. Okay, so we'll see that feature. We'll discuss on that now. So, and then we'll see the implementation. Okay, so there are few properties of the Ajax service or the service flow which we will discuss first, and then we are going to implement whatever we want to implement today. Okay, so let's create a service flow now. Okay, before I create a service flow from here, now definitely I can create a service flow from here, and then I can add those same signature which I tried to add, which was discussing about, like data as an input and results as an output, list of string. So this I can definitely create manually from this option by clicking on service flow and manually going and adding all those parameters in the variables. But if you want to have to get all these things in an automated way, where you don't want to add the parameters again, just to think, that by chance if any developer, he doesn't keep the same signature, then in that case my Ajax service will not work. So if you have a fear like that, then definitely you can create a service flow also from this option called new. Okay, it's like an activity wizard which we saw in case of a process layer, where we tried creating some human services that day. Similarly, if I create a service flow from here, it will automatically take the signature of this dummy service. Okay, I don't have to go and manually add the parameters again, right? So let's create it from here. So I'll click on new, and I'll give a name, say uh, populate type ahead items. Okay, I click on finish. This would create the service for me, and exactly what I was talking about. If I go to variables now, I see the same input and output here. Okay, so in a way it is helping me. So if I'm not aware of the signature, or if even if I think that, the by chance if something gets missed, although it doesn't get missed, but still it's good if you create it from here. There is no chance of any error. Now, I was talking about to configure this type ahead to this particular Ajax service, that whether we have really created an Ajax service or an integration service, or whenever you create a service flow, how do we configure it as an integration service and how do we configure it as an Ajax service? Let's discuss on that now. Okay, now let's go to the overview of the service flow. Now here we have three sections. One is the common section, with the first one, which says the name and the documentation of this particular service flow which we have created. Next is Ajax access, and Ajax access here it says specify what access level is required to call this service flow. Basically, this is the place where we need to configure the service flow either as an Ajax service or as an integration service. Okay. Now, first option is do not allow Ajax calls. The first option is do not allow Ajax calls. If I select this option for this service flow will not behave as an Ajax service. Instead, it will behave as an integration service. Any kind of database integration I want to do, say I want to insert some data into database table. Say I want to make some Java integration. Say there is a jar which I need to call to get some information. Say I want to make some REST integration. Say I want to call some REST URL to get some data from some external API. Everything can be implemented using integration service. And if you are implementing an integration service, we need to make sure that the first option is selected. Right? I believe we are good. Very simple. Second and third option, either of them if I select, this service flow will start working as an Ajax service. Now there is some difference between these two. Okay. Second option says allow calls from trusted callers. Okay. There is a feature of an Ajax service that that I can create an Ajax service and I can pass the name of the Ajax service to some external application, and they can call our Ajax service at any point of time, okay, to pass any information, and using that information I can trigger my BPD. So all these things can be done using an Ajax service. So in that case, when your Ajax service is getting called by some other implementation, by some external application altogether, in that case I need to select the second option. Okay, I give an example of our project where we have a service flow which is an Ajax service, and that Ajax service is exposed to the external Java service. Okay, so the Java application, they are sending us some data from the DB. So whenever some user is creating some kind of request from a specific UI, some data gets generated, and they are passed to the Java service. And the Java service, they pass the entire information to us, to our Ajax service, and we get that information. And after we get the information in the Ajax service, from the Ajax service itself, I am triggering my BPD to create a workflow. Okay, so this entire implementation is done using the help of an Ajax service, which has been exposed to the outside applications. So in that case, I need to select allow calls from trusted caller, so that I can get the information, and I can also similar way I can also trigger some BPDs. Okay, specifically to get some information from outside application. That is the reason why this second option is there. Okay, I believe we are good with the second option. And third option, will come back again. If you have any queries, we'll definitely discuss. Just want to complete these three things. So third option is allow calls from all users. Now allow calls from all users we need to use in two features. One, today, exactly what we are trying to implement here. We are not going to call any DB. We are going to create a list inside this Ajax service, from which few items will be taken and will be displayed in the type ahead. Okay, so in this case, when the call is happening within BPM, then in that case I should select allow calls from all users, where nobody is calling this service. Okay, then in that case I should use allow calls from all users. And another feature is this third option, it includes another feature, that is, say this, like I said, this Ajax service will interact with the database. Okay, say my Ajax service will interact with the database and will get some information from there, and that I will be using to display on my drop down or on my type end. Even for this implementation also, I will select the third option, allow calls from all users. First of all, guys, just you need to understand that whether your Ajax service is getting called or not. Is it getting called? No. My Ajax service is getting called within BPM, but no external application is calling my Ajax service in this scenario. So in that case, I will always select the third option. But in case my Ajax service is getting called externally by someone external from my BPM application, then in that case I should select the second option. Okay, so second option is when your Ajax service is getting called by some external application or API, and third option is when you are calling this Ajax service within BPM. Okay, so maybe whenever you are clicking on the drop down, your Ajax service is getting triggered and is getting you some data from DB. Then that is allow calls from all users. Okay, so this way you have to understand. Any questions or doubts over here?
Yeah, Rahul. So one quick question. Um, so in the second option, allow calls. Sorry. In the second option, right? So the trusted callers. If you want to, let's say, if you want to implement any REST API call, anything, right? So when you say Ajax services, do you consider that REST API call or any other
No,
RESTful service integration as Ajax service?
no.
Okay, that comes
I will,
under
I will, I will
do
go
not
for
allow.
integration service. Yes.
Yeah. So here you said that
Hmm.
if you're doing some external calls, like not
Hmm.
from the BPM, then we use the third option, right? Third or second option, right? So what
Hmm.
would that examples would be? Like external calls would be?
I just explained. So it's very clear. Again, let me explain. So I have created one Ajax service
Okay.
which is getting called from outside BPM. Then I should select the second option.
Okay.
And third option is allow calls from all users. Is when I'm implementing the Ajax service within BPM and no external application is calling my Ajax service. Instead, I am calling from the Ajax service to some database to get some data. Then in that
Oh,
case, I should go for the third option.
makes sense.
And even today's implementation, where I'm going to populate just a list of countries inside this Ajax service. So here also my Ajax service is not getting called by outside application. So I would go for the third option.
Makes sense. Yeah.
So for our implementation today, we are going to select the third option, that is allow calls from all users. Now the good thing guys about this allow calls from all users is, even if your Ajax service is getting called from some outside BPM application, still the third option will work. Okay. So second option is specifically definitely is that whenever your Ajax service is getting called from outside BPM, then definitely I should go for the second option. But even if I select third option, still it will work. Okay. All right. So we are good with the Ajax access. Now I believe we can move on to the next option, that is additional properties. Any other doubts, guys?
No, Rahul.
All right. Okay. Now we come to the next property, that is additional property. The next section says additional properties, and here the first option says enable caching of service result. Very very important. Something which comes in our certifications. Okay. Caching, service caching. What is service caching? Okay, before we understand the service caching, let me give you a brief history. The service caching feature was initially there only for the Ajax service. If you today go to desktop designer, if you create an Ajax service, there also you will see this option called caching of service result. Okay, but if you create an integration service from your desktop designer, this option is not there. So it is available only for your Ajax services in desktop designer. But fortunately, in the web designer, for a service flow which can be configured both as an integration service or either as an Ajax service, for both I can configure this caching. Okay, that is the advantage that they have added with this web designer. Now, what is caching of service result? Very very important. So whenever we are fetching some data from the database, right? So whenever we're making a call to fetch some data from the DB, okay. For example, our leave types, sick leave, privilege leave, casual leave, all these things, right? So say we are maintaining a database table with this master data. Now, whenever I create an Ajax service to get that result from DB, instead of calling that database table every time, if I enable this cache for the next 24 hours, what would happen? For the first time in the day, when this Ajax service will be called, it will go to the DB, it will get the data from the database, and it will store the same list of leaf types in the cache memory. Now, for the next 24 hours, whenever this Ajax service will be called, it will not go to the DB anymore. It will only go to the cache memory. It will get the result, and it will show it to the end user. So, which clearly means that performance-wise, caching is always a good option. Instead of making an expensive call every time, I am enabling the cache of this service, and I'm making sure that for the next 20, whatever I configure. So if I enable this option, you get a chance to configure your timer over here. Okay, so how much time this service will store the data in the cache memory. Okay, so by default 12 hours is selected, so you can definitely increase that to anything you want. You can see you have days, hours, minutes, and seconds. So you have everything to configure all the time. So whatever you want to configure, you can definitely configure. But yes, whenever we are doing the configuration, we need to make sure of one thing, that say if I configure say 30 days over here. Okay, so what will happen for the next 30 days? So first time in the day it will call the DB. First time whenever this AX service is called, it will call the DB, it will get the result. And for the next 30 days, whenever this Ajax service will be called, it will not get the data from the DB, it will only get it from the cache memory. Now the problem over here is, whatever time I'm configuring, I need to make sure that within this time the master data in the database table should not be updated. Then only I can implement this. Say I implement 30 days, and within 15 days your master data gets updated with say additional of another two type of two leaf types are there, but you are not getting the updated data, you are picking up from the cache memory, right? So whatever you configure, definitely we need to make sure we discuss this with database team, that hey, how long that we are updating the master data, and that way we can configure it. It's very simple and something very something to really we implement really in a real time project, that is caching of our Ajax service. And the good thing is that even an integration service can also be implemented for getting some data from the DB. So even if you're using some integration service, if you select the first option also, then also you get this option of caching of service result. So nowadays we can implement it both for Ajax as well as integration service, which is a good thing, right? So understood, guys, what is caching of service result? Any questions?
No, Rahul.
Okay. Automatically synced share business objects. Now, shared business objects we haven't discussed till now. We'll definitely discuss this. We have a session in our next 50% regarding shared business object. So we'll discuss on that time. Okay, what is actually a shared business object? It's very simple. Basically, a business object which is shared across all the processes, and it's not that simple. I mean, yes, I can definitely create a business object. I can use that in multiple processes. So that doesn't make it a shared object. But shared object is something like, say, if I have process one and if I have process two, and I create a business object and I make it a shared business object. Now, whenever process one, say process one is triggered first, okay, and process one is using the shared business object, uh, say leave application. Now, whenever this leave application gets populated in process one, automatically process two will have the same data, whatever process one is populated for leave application. The reason being, it's a shared business object, and whatever runtime data is captured in one instance, the same runtime data is being shared with other instances also. Okay, so something we don't use, the reason being is very complicated, it's very complex, because there can be a scenario that I mean from a process, if I have to pass my some set of information to another process, there are several ways actually in BP. So one thing is very sure about this is that that whatever data I am creating in one process, I want to share the same information with another process. That is the motive behind creating this shared business object. But there are so many components available nowadays in BPM that even without implementing a shared business object, I can still pass the same set of information from one process to another process. Okay, and what is that? We have events. Okay, so we will have a session on events. That time we'll discuss more about it. So we have events to do that. So we have events to send information from one process to another process. And implementing a shared business object adds more complexity. So nowadays the architects, they don't prefer using a shared business object. So in our case, in my project, we have like three processes where the same business object is being used, and we have implemented events. So when I joined 3 years back and I asked my senior, who is right now the offshore manager, so when I asked him that why didn't we implement shared business object, why did we go for events? So he said that shared business object is much more complex to implement than events. Event is also complex, but event is something you can expect a response. You can expect something. It will work uniformly every time. But at times, shared business object doesn't work uniformly. So that is a problem. So that is the reason we avoid using it and we use events instead. But definitely, we are going to see how this shared business object is being used, and we have a session on this on our second 50% of our session. So that time we'll discuss. Okay. So right now it is not important, shared business object. For this scenario, definitely for implementing any Ajax service, shared business object is not important. This option is there if you are using a shared business object in your application. That time you can enable this. By default, it is always enabled. So you can keep this enabled anyways. If you don't have a shared business object, still you can enable it. No way, if you can, even if you disable it, still it will work. So not a problem. So right now you can ignore this, and let's come back to our implementation. And of course, yes, I will disable this caching because nowhere I'm calling the DB to get any result. So I'm just populating my static list kind of thing inside the Ajax service. So I don't need this caching. Coding is very simple. I mean, whatever coding I write, whenever after I write it, you will think that uh, how can it be so simple? I mean, we thought of Ajax service, we'll write some if else and for loops, and we'll check with every item whether it is matching or not. That is something which we should write, but fortunately, this new Ajax service that we have got, using this 8.5.7, 8.6 onwards, we don't have to write much code over here. Okay. So you see this variables, what we have, input and output. This result list, I will populate with the country list. That's it, nothing else. Okay, and you will see how it will work going in the type ahead. So tw dot local dot results is equal to new tw dot object dot list of dot string again tw dot local dot results. So we have this many list. Okay. Now, one thing you guys can understand that this implementation is fine if we have very small list of items. Usually, if I have more list of items, say if I have 199 countries, so definitely I'm not going to write the list. So the scenario that I explained, that in that case we'll call the DB and we'll get only those results which is matching with the input, whatever we are adding as an end user. Now, this implementation is fine if you have a very small list of items to display, and there are cases where you will have a very small list to display in the typepad or in the drop down. So in that case, definitely will not make an expensive call to the DB, right? So we're going to populate some list in your Ajax service or in the backend in some script to use that list for displaying in the typepad or in the drop down, okay? Like we have seen for our type of leave. Similarly, we see for this list of countries. So usually, if you go for a banking project, you will have there can be multiple drop downs and type heads, which will have very less number of items. Say, uh, while filling up for an application form for applying for a loan in a bank, a very common drop down that comes is tenure, right? For how much time you want to take the loan. So obviously that list is very small, like one, two, three, four, five, maximum six, right? So that list you will definitely not fetch from the DB. So you want to populate somewhere in your BPM, maybe in some script or maybe in some service. So the same way, what I'm trying to say here, if you have a very small list of items, then you need to implement it in the same way which we are implementing here. So that you can do either by adding a script before your codes if you're implementing a drop down, and in case of a type ahead, definitely I can go for a script also. That before the codes I can add a script, and that script I can use to show it in my type ahead. But the good thing is always if you use an Ajax service, because Ajax service from the response point of view, it is the best to use for a type ahead. Okay, so if you save the changes, and if I now go back to my type ahead human service, I can see this Ajax service has been added over here. And if I run this now, so country list, so if I type here in, so I should get, okay, so maybe okay, yeah, now it is coming. So now you can see, so I can see only those countries which has in it. Okay, so if I select UN, so I should be able to see only those countries which has UN in it, right? And for this, I did not write any complex logic. I did not write. So initially in our older versions, since we never had a type ahead coach view, we had to write some code in the Ajax service. Say if whatever I'm getting as an input, if that is matching any with any of the items in the list, then I'm going to show it and I'm going to populate that list in the output variable. So that's how we used to implement before. But now since this typed Ajax typed coach view has been added already, so for this we don't have to implement any complex logic. So simply you can just populate the results, and whatever you're entering here from that results, it is actually trying to find out that which one has a match, and whatever matches it gets, it will show you over here. So it's very simple. But database implementation, guys, is completely different, so that would have a different logic altogether. Okay, so I have to design my query in a way using the like operator, that that I will get only those list of items which are matching with the input. So that implementation is completely different. We'll see that later on. But for this list, whenever you have a very small list and still you want to populate that as a type head, then this is the way. Any questions, guys? Any doubts we have on this implementation?
Do we need to already sort the list while creating, or it will take care?
Sorry, I didn't get you. Could you come again?
Uh, do we need to sort the list
Okay.
while creating, or it will take care?
Sort the list.
While creating, do we need to do any special thing like all A first? Nothing like that, right?
No, no, nothing is required. Nothing is required. So sorting, basically you mean sorting in alphabetical order, something like that.
Yes, yes. So while creating, do we need to do that, or it will take care by
It
itself?
should take care by itself, but let me check. There can be some option over here. Usually there is an option. Okay. No, I don't see an option here. So it will take care automatically. That I can see. Whenever you're typing U and it is showing you in a very alphabetical order only.
Oh, okay.
Usually we had some option over here, but I believe that is for a different coach view. Maybe for a drop down we have. Wherein to enable the sorting basically. Here it is taken care by its automatically. So no need to worry. So we have some placeholder text over here. It's always good, that if you give some placeholder text for your type ahead, because the end user might not able to understand what he needs to do over here. So here, like you see, it's showing me type your country name. So if I see this as an end user, I can understand. Okay, so now I need to type something over here. I will type my country name over here. So I can type say IN, and I can get only those countries which has IN in it. So automatically it will take.
Rahul, quick question. Can we have both type ahead and drop down feature?
Both type ahead and drop down feature.
Yeah.
I think we have. Let me just check. I believe we can see it. New application. Initially, we had. I mean, the example that I was giving you, that how we used to convert something into type ahead in the older versions. So
Okay.
there we had that feature where even a type ahead, where even a drop down will act as a type ahead. But let me check if we have this feature. No, I don't see. Why it is not coming? Just- Hmm, because items from service selected. Most item list here. Okay. Now let's see if we are getting some option to type something. No, still we don't have.
Okay.
No, we don't have any configuration option also for this,
Okay, so it can be either type ahead or drop down, right?
or a drop down. Yeah.
Okay. Okay.
Basically, if you had that feature, then possibly type it code view will not be there. So that will work both as a type in and a drop down. So because we have two separate features, that's the reason they have given us two separate code views for this.
Okay.
Okay. Any queries, guys, on today's implementation? So I have to make a hard stop. I have a call in the next 5 minutes. I believe 9:50. Let me know, guys, if you have any doubts.
No, Rahul, I'm good.
I'm good, Rahul.
I'm good, Rahul.
Okay. Okay. So one thing before we drop off. So Jahan, I saw. Sorry, not Jahan. Jahan was someone on the last batch.
Okay.
Okay. So yeah, Pasha. So I saw your email,
Yeah.
right? So there is one more participant who was facing the same issue
Okay.
yesterday,
Yeah.
and I found that somehow I didn't share one item with him. Okay.
Okay.
So I when I added that and when I said him. By the time I dropped an email to him, he said that already it is installed now. So he was also getting the same error and he
Yeah.
had the same logs.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. But now it is installed in his system. So what I would suggest, that I saw yesterday that, uh, the first disk that was there, first file, one of three. So
Yes.
there the users were not added properly. So I added them. So just one last time, if you just download it and just try to install once again. If it still works, if it works, then it's good. If it doesn't work, then I believe you have to use the BAW because the logs I saw, I don't see
Mm.
any issue with the DB2.
Okay.
So you
Yeah.
have confirmed that DB2 instances have been removed properly.
Yes.
So how do you guys actually remove the DB2 instance before uninstalling BPM?
The generally what I'm doing is I'm installing the new in a new installation only, and not into the already existing installation. So
Okay.
yeah, always I'm doing in a new system, but I'm facing the same problem.
Okay. So that is telling that installed with error. So after that, are you doing any uninstallation?
No, no, I didn't did anything again. So even I tried one time, like through that manager,
Hmm.
that IBM installation manager. I used to uninstall that
Okay.
fully. Yeah.
Okay. 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 Try installing it again. I added you. Okay, today morning. So try downloading and installing. If it works fine, it's good. Then otherwise, you
Okay.
have to use the trial, or you can use the 8.6. 8.6 also you can use, guys. So no issues with 8.6 because in 8.6 version, everything is the same. I mean, the even this web designer that you see that we're
Yeah.
using for Workflow Center for this BAW, it is still 8.6 version. Okay, it has not been upgraded. So in BAW, what has happened? All the other components have been added together. So that way it has changed, and definitely somehow the names have been changed. So initially it was Process Center, now it has become Workflow Center. But from the designer point of view, nothing has changed. Everything is the same. Okay. So
Okay, Rahul. I will try today again.
yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. All right. Thank you, guys. So practice is at your end. We'll come back tomorrow for the code view session. Okay.
Thank you, Rahul.
Thank you, everyone. Have a good day.
Yeah, thank you guys.